yes, it's okay to put in there, but it comes off with a bit of fluff when you start with this giant. The healthcare industry is 4.5 billion. We work on this one particular sector. I'd much rather hear your plan around how you're going to identify and enter your niche without the rest of the fluff.
The first post today is from a new subreddit, and it's the managers subreddit. And this person is saying, new to a C-level position, feeling overwhelmed. So they say, hey everyone, I've grown fast at a startup in the past 4 years from an individual contributor to a manager and recently to C-level. So now I manage managers. Without any real training, just based on my performance. I'm kind of struggling to get into my new role as the managers are not that senior. I still need to micromanage a lot. I have a lot of meetings every day, ending with a lot of notes daily. Sometimes I feel paralyzed because besides managing my department, I also need to think about the bigger picture and cooperate with other departments. And the list of all the things that has to be done connected is bigger and bigger. How do you handle multiple meetings, projects, work on action steps, and still manage your team tasks? Looking for a productivity system for high-level managers. How do you stay focused on everything? How do you prioritize and avoid getting overwhelmed by petty details? They're asking so many questions,
Yeah.
but it boils down
Yeah.
to the same thing of how do you manage everything essentially.
Yeah, I think and I think the last paragraph there is important too. Once every few months they report to shareholders, and I have a hard time even realizing what we accomplished. So that to me means there's like a lot going on without much reflection. So I think this kind of speaks to the post I made the other week around when does a founder become a CEO as well, right? There's certain aspects of the job, of the role that you take on that are discreetly different from being an individual contributor. But I think the important thing for people that move into those management positions is to quickly understand what it is. One, what is it that you do that others can't, right? Because that becomes your individual contribution to the wider team, right? So that's the first thing. And then really, if you're talking about a new role as a manager, then you really need to be understanding your people, right? Understand what strengths and weaknesses you have within your team. And then your main job is to harness that and point them in the right direction. What I get a sense from this post is a bit of a feeling of like a lot of stuff going on. And they specifically call out, I want a structure. So it tells me they've probably come from a role that had a lot of maybe easy to follow steps or like a really structured work environment, really structured outcomes. Management is far from that often, right? In that you will see things pop up or land on your desk that one, maybe you don't think are yours to deal with, but you have to. And two, you'll have competing priorities in your team that you have to figure out how to rank, stack, and then execute on. So I don't think like when you talk about something like a productivity system for high level managers, the only thing like that comes to mind as a sort of whiteboard productivity system to me is the Eisenhower matrix, which is essentially, urgent, important, urgent sort of assessment where you go through your tasks for the day and you rank them appropriately. And you say, well, if it's important but not urgent, right, I can put it to the side maybe, but not as much as I could if it was urgent and important, right? I need to get it done now because someone needs it. So that's probably one system I'd look into and flesh that idea a bit more. And then also when it comes to multiple shareholders or stakeholders, I should say, in a team, the other one is a RACI matrix if you've got multiple projects. And I've mentioned this before too. A RACI matrix is, again, a great way just to reframe who's actually in charge of delivery and who's actually in charge of doing. And so RACI refers to responsible, accountable, communicated, and informed. And so they're different levels of inclusion into a project outcome. So for example, this manager might have an obligation to the board to provide their progress reports once a month, right? So they are accountable. The person responsible for compiling those reports, however, is probably their one down, the day-to-day task manager, right? So the person responsible is one down. The person accountable is the one up. Who needs to be communicated? Well, probably the wider team because they're contributing data to those reports. Who needs to be informed? Someone else in a different department because they'll use that report as part of their quarterly review, right? So there's a way you can frame up a project to really drill down. And if you find yourself doing that RACI matrix, and you as the individual manager are responsible and accountable for everything, then you need to figure out how to delegate better, right? And delegation comes down to the ability to deliver intent to a team or a subordinate and trust that they're going to be able to execute on that intent to a degree that you're happy with, right? And if you're not happy with it, then you need to do more training. You need to do more onboarding to common documentation, common standards, common practices, so you can delegate more effectively. That's what that really comes down to. And then, yeah, I guess finally, the realization of what you accomplished is simple. Just have clear goals, have clear recorded goals, clear steps towards success, and then reflection upon how well you've achieved against those goals from a team perspective and an individual perspective.
How do you do that reflection well?
Well, you've got to have
Which sounds like a weird
records, right?
question.
Yeah, you've got to have records, and that's
Yeah.
the thing is, you can get to the end of the quarter and look back and go, I don't even know what we did, because you didn't really have a goal to achieve. You didn't have anywhere you were actually running towards. So at the start of that reporting period, you need to identify what it is we're running towards. And we do this with our quarterly board meetings across our companies, right? We'll have essentially what we'd call 3 BAU goals, and then we have sort of 3 big rocks. And the key component of those goals isn't just saying I'm going to go do X. It's saying
Mhm.
I'm going to go do X. The way I'm going to test it is A, B, and C. The way I'm going to record it is here. And my measure of success is this. I will fail that task if I don't do A, B, and C, right? So you actually have a whole component of measurable outcomes. So you can, one, track it in real time and see, are we moving towards that goal end state? Or are my lead indicators such that I'm not going to achieve that goal? And at the end of the quarter, you look back and you can look at, particularly, you can look at the systems that you designated as how I'm going to measure it, right? We talk about Baremetrics, right? I'm going to measure my MRR growth, my daily active new customers, my daily trials through Baremetrics. I don't care what my CRM says. Baremetrics is my source of truth. This is what I'm going to use to measure my re-engagement campaign. And so that's what you need to do. You need to have the goal, the systems, the KPIs, and then the fail criteria as well.
How far in advance, like, of board meetings, like, say you have one coming up, how far in advance do you start thinking about all of these goals for the next quarter?
Well, ideally, you want to hit the quarter running, right? So in that last month of the quarter, you should already have lead indicators to say whether your current quarter goals are going to be successful or not. And if they're not, then you might want to reshape those current goals and to have change the initiatives that you're running, or you might have to dismiss the goal because it was purely a quarterly experiment that didn't play out, right? That's particularly more salient for something like an outbound campaign. We designed a whole new outbound messaging, so we want to run that campaign for 8 weeks. By the 9th week, we've got an idea of connection rate, open rate, demos booked, etc. You can start to either adjust it coming into the next quarter. What I have seen in the past, and I've been guilty of this myself, is that you're running so hard at the quarter, it comes down to that last week of the quarter, and you're
Hmm.
like, wow, I need to do my next quarter goals. And
Hmm.
before you've even delivered them, right, it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks into the next quarter, and you're only just getting the team on board for the next quarter goals. You've lost a third, right, of that time. So yeah, I think it's important to have that pre-planning, and also it also helps there where you can start to layer your strategic outcomes over a half, right, a H1, H2, or a year as well, because then you've got some sort of ideas in the bank as to what is going to shape your next quarter goals. How do you prioritize and avoid getting overwhelmed by petty details? There's a really good HBR article from years ago now. I think it's called something like "Who's Got the Monkey" or "Monkey Management." And the concept there is how to effectively delegate, but also identify when you're solving someone else's problem. And it goes into a bit of a vignette about a manager who's coming down to Friday afternoon, and one of their subordinates walks in. The manager's just flat out doing whatever they do, and they say, "Hey boss, I've got this budget report, can you look over it?" And you're like, "Yep, no worries, put it on my desk." And they put it on there, and then like 2 o'clock comes around and they come in and say, "Hey, have you managed to have a look at that report yet?" And you're like, "No, not yet, I'll get to it soon." Right? And then that person's out on the golf course that afternoon. Manager's still slaving away, looks out and like, why are they out on the golf course and why I'm here? What they identify essentially is it's easy for a manager who's overwhelmed to just keep saying yes and take on the task because they think that's what they need to do. But if you take a
Right.
moment to pause and you treat each problem as a monkey, and you think about someone walking into your office and placing a monkey on your table, right? That's the task. They've asked you to review that
Hmm.
report, and you've now got to feed that monkey. It's yours to feed. That person doesn't have a problem anymore because they've passed it on to you. And so you say
Hmm.
to yourself in that point in time, you say, well, actually, if you say to that person, have you run it past so and so, right? Have you run it past
Hmm.
the other department? No, I haven't done it yet. Okay, can you go away to that first, please, and then bring it back to me at this time, right? That monkey goes out with them, right? It stays with them. It's still theirs to feed. You then look at it later and they come back in and go, oh yeah, so-and-so reviewed it. We only need to tick in this last box now and we're good to go. All right, let's do it together now. Come in and sit down, 2 minutes, review anything you need me to talk about. No, good, tick in the box, go. They take the monkey with them. But if you allow that person to go place that monkey on your desk, the next person comes in and puts another one, all of a sudden you've got all these monkeys to feed and you can't deal with it anymore, right? And the key quote that I always pull from that is, when your problem becomes my problem, I can't help you anymore because I can't help someone without a problem. So the idea is you want that person to still own the problem, the task, so you can help them get through it versus you owning the outcome yourself. So that's always a really good one to review on as well. Yeah.
And to their point, I remember my question. To their point, like they were saying, like I have to micromanage a lot. Like that really stood out to me because ideally they're doing one task, right? They're giving it to you. You give them feedback, and then they take it and they're like, okay, I know what to do next time in terms so I don't get this feedback again. And then they're like improving ideally. But if that's not happening, how would you broach that situation?
Yeah. So there's all these things that interplay with these sort of conversations, and it really does, like, it's hard because I've come from an environment that, I went through formal leadership training, leadership experience, and these are the systems you build up over time. So when you're thrust into these positions, it's really hard to learn on the fly. And so
Yeah.
for me, when I look at this, I'm like, well, here's exactly what I do because I know that's what's worked in the past, right?
Yeah.
And something that I always come back to, and this was a military concept called mission command. We'd always talk about once you've got a level of subordinates below you and you're issuing orders, there's a thing called mission command that sort of allows for telling someone what to do, not how to do it, right? And the
Mm.
important thing there is there's three components that come with that. There is trust, risk, and common tactical doctrine. And that last one's probably the most important when it comes to the civilian world as well, is because, like you say, if you're micromanaging, it's probably because the outcome is not to a level that you are comfortable with, right? They're not quite
Yeah.
getting there. And so that's on you now as a manager to fix that. And the way you do that is through training, right? Through clear instructions, clear SOPs, standard operating procedures, clear policies, everything like that. So when you onboard someone new and you can give them the playbook and say, this is how we do things here, then when you get to that point of having to give a task, all you're going to say is, hey, Andrew, I need you to spin up a new Google Ads campaign for me. We want to target charge by users. Now, you know that our monthly budget for such a campaign is $5,000. You know that we have a marketing folder in the drive that has all our assets available to you. You already know those things because during your onboarding, I delivered that guideline, that SOP, that framework, right? So now I can
Mhm.
trust that you're going to execute on that task as effectively as you can. I still take on some risk because I'm not doing it myself. But because I've put the work in to bring you up to a speed where we're operating off a common language, then that risk is decreased, right? And so that's the key component I think people miss when they talk about micromanaging. Is because, one, they don't trust their subordinates enough, but the reason they don't trust them is because they're not talking the same language half the time. And so someone will deliver something thinking that's the right thing to do, but without operating in the same framework, they could be completely off the mark. So yeah, trust, risk, and common tactical doctrine. And the remediation for that, when you find, say, a teammate who's not up to standard, then you go back to that sort of that SCAR framework: skills, knowledge, attitude, and resources. They have the skills. Have I given them the ability to access the knowledge, wikis, SOPs, etc.? To have the right attitude? Were they actually operating in good faith, right? Are they actually giving it a good crack? And then finally, do they have the right systems in place? So, if you are saying to them, I want you to do an outbound campaign, and I haven't given you access to, Zoom Info or
Mhm.
Apollo or a list software tool, it's like you're not given the resources to succeed. Same thing. I want you to run a PPC campaign for ChargeBee and Google Ads. You've got $500 and I expect 5 NPC. You're like, that's not adequate resources to get that outcome, right? So again, SCAR framework is about individual management that then leads up into decreasing that risk, increasing trust, and making sure that you're not micromanaging to the nth degree.
So the second question we have here is on being afraid to start a business. So this is in the entrepreneur subreddit, and this person says, afraid to start. Hey all, I need some advice here. I'm working at a sales job right now that makes 120K. That's nice. When I first started, I loved it. Now I'm not as passionate as I used to be. I want to start my own company in this industry, but I'm afraid of losing a a nice steady salary. I'm only 23 and been doing this for 3 years. Good jobs are hard to come by, and I don't want to shoot myself in the foot. My biggest fear is starting the company and it completely implodes, and now I have nothing. I gave up a well paying job for nothing. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush type of deal. Any advice on getting this over this fear is appreciated. Thank you.
This is great. I love this post, one, because it's clearly not pitching anything. There's no product associated here. It's just purely someone asking for advice.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these times is like, I want to start my own company and here it is. Like I've started this pitch, but please give me some feedback. This one's purely like, I've got an idea. Like, what do you guys think? Right. And I don't know if Reddit's the best
Yeah.
place to come ask these questions, but for like real life advice. But hey, that's where we are. I think so. This isn't unusual, right? Like we've all been there. We have that light bulb moment. We have this problem like, I'm going to go start my business. We're going to go run a bar. I'm going to start a bar and it's going to be different to all the other bars because it does this. So I think at a salary of that at 23,
I know.
that
I was
is
like, that's nice.
that is such a good cushion to have. And
Yeah.
this isn't to say that you shouldn't pursue the goal. It's that I think if anything, you're in a better position to pursue another goal because of that safety net. And I think some of the comments there have rightly called it out. If you want to start your own company, and you don't want to risk your current steady salary, then do it on the side, right? And there used to be a time, and I think it was actually a toxic side of the startup culture where it was, and you see this on Shark Tank quite a bit in the early days, right? Oh, I'm not going to invest because you're not all in. You're still working your normal job while doing this on the side, right? And there's this whole idea that you need to be all or nothing into a startup venture. Sometimes that may be true when it requires all of your time and effort and you cannot allocate time elsewhere. But if you're trying to test the concept of an idea, and with the current state of automation and sales support software you can get, I think you could absolutely start to do this on the side. You can absolutely, if it is something that you're passionate about and you really want to give it a crack, then I would suggest, absolutely start building it on the side. You're not giving up a well-paying job. You're starting to work towards something that's going to make you happier, that's going to give you passion back. And then, when you start to see it manifest or not, then you can figure out your next step. And again, 23 with a great level of financial comfort, now would be the best time more than ever to do something on the side and see if it's going to work. I wouldn't suggest jumping straight into it without a proven POC, MVP, market, anything, right? But the fear of actually starting something is generally, what's holding you back. So I'd just start in the spare time, reallocate your priorities outside of core work and go from there.
Yeah, and that's easier for people of a certain status to say, "Oh, you're not all in." Like,
isn't it funny also though? Like once you do get those people that have started something successful, as soon as they're at that point of it being successful, they're like, "But what do you do outside of work?" It's like, are you taking appropriate breaks and like doing so? What drives your interest outside of work? It's like, well, hang on, you told me I had to be all in on this idea, and now all of a sudden I've got to find this like other thing to take my mind off work. Like where does that tipping point happen, right? In that space. And that's, I think you're dead right in that you say it's easy for some people to say sitting in their ivory tower and looking down and saying, no, you need to be all in. And then as soon as you're all in, it's like, okay, but make sure you're not all in and, you're looking after yourself. Yeah. It's a bit of hypocrisy there.
Cool. So let's move on to the next one. Let me mark this.
Oof. Quit my job to be my own boss.
So this is the continuation of that story, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe this was 6 months ago versus today. It could be it, right? Yeah. And then actually our first post is like the next 6 months down the track. So you've gone from hating your current job to wanting to start something new, being your own boss and hating it, moving up to a manager's job and having it. Yeah, we could write a whole story on this. This is a comic book strip.
It's funny. Yeah, it really is. It really is. Maybe Churnbuster Bear can make an appearance.
Maybe.
But so this one is on the small business subreddit. So I quit my job to be my own boss, and now I feel completely lost. Anyone else feel weirdly bad about being their own boss? I left a stable job because I thought I hated working under someone. Turns out I might just hate managing myself more. I have the ideas. I know the problem I want to solve, but the structure, the consistency, the energy management, it's a mess. Starting to wonder if this means I'm not cut out for this, or if I just haven't figured out how to actually function yet.
Yeah, this is tough, I guess, because I've suffered this in many ways. In that, not necessarily the piece about being your own boss. I've always had pretty clear guidelines of what's expected of me. But when you move into a more sort of like what I'd call a cloud position, where you're overseeing multiple people and your individual contribution is less visible to yourself, then that's tough to manage. And I think this is similar here. I feel like they've got a weird perspective on it though. Like I think I hate managing myself. What I tend to do there is remove myself from that and like what is the entity I'm controlling, i.e. the business, right? That's what you should be looking at. I know the problem I want to solve, but the structure, the consistency, the energy management is a mess. Starting to wonder if this means I'm not cut out for this or just haven't figured out how I actually function yet. Yeah, it's kind of strange to me. I would suggest you've quit your job to be your own boss. So one, you might have been feeling overwhelmed or, underappreciated in your current role. You started your own business and now you're like, how do I manage myself? I would actually say, how do I just focus on the business, right? How do I manage the business? Separate yourself from that. If that's where their problem lies, in that they're not doing well as an individual contributor to manage the business, then sure, you need to take a look at what systems and processes you've got in place. But I think continually learning, continually looking for people in your industry or in your business area that have done the same thing, how they're doing it, going and sitting down with a mentor, finding someone who has done that in the past or is currently doing it that you respect, that you think will be happy to give advice. That would be good too, because I don't know the context of this, like the industry, the business, the startup, their history. There's a lot of context there that we're missing, right? But the best way to do it is to look to others, how they've done it in the past. And if you can find someone to emulate and someone to reflect on, then, why wouldn't you do it that way? The hard thing is, when you're an individual contributor as part of a team and you have a set of responsibilities that are clearly defined, it's very easy to see the outcome. I did this, then this happened, right? When you're overly responsible for everything, then it's a lot harder to validate your individual contribution, I guess. So yeah, that's pretty much where
Really?
I'd
But
stand with that.
I feel like it would be more apparent, no? Because like you're
So
the
it's
one fully
apparent, but it's harder to validate. Like it's easy to
yeah.
say that like that's just the way it should be. And I think it raises another good
Uh,
point around sometimes you might have a misaligned opinion, observation, or reflection on how you work versus what others see you do, right? And you see this sometimes where people will be like, "Oh, I just felt like I didn't get anything done this week." But you look on the outside in and you go, "Hang on, you did X, Y, and Z, right? And you did this." And like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And you're like, "That's huge. Like you did a lot." And so like your frame of reference might be different. So when you're in that team environment and you were contributing and getting stuff done, you may have felt like you were working hard. When you start to work for yourself, it's a completely different dynamic, different framework, and therefore the way you worked before isn't the same way you work now, right? It's like the way you work versus the way you should work.
right.
And if it's that different, then you might not have that right reference point to say, yeah, I actually am being productive, and it's just not the same type of productive that I was in the previous job. That's the other thing to consider. Because I even think back,
I
I
feel
think back
like
to like
people are
previous
too hard on
jobs.
themselves.
Yeah, that's what I think. People are very. I
Yeah.
know I am. I have weeks there where I'm like, what did I actually get done this week? Right? I go back through my calendar, and it's actually been really useful with this LinkedIn strategy of document rather than create, is because it forces me to be reflective on, what I've done, what have I talked about, what have I contributed, what are we getting done in the business. And it's kind of validated a lot of our efforts more. But it's the same thing. Things start to slip away, right? We're now 1 month into the quarter, and I look at my goal matrix every day because it's on my desktop. And I'm like, okay, what's their status against all these things, right? And you can get really down in the sense that nothing's actually happened yet, right? Like as in we haven't seen like a result. We've done our Slack kickoff meetings for our increasing engagement there, but the end result is higher retention, right? I'm not going to see that for another 90 days, probably. We've done this, I did some work yesterday on identifying SEO priorities in order to increase our SEO searchability for new articles that aren't performing as they were 6 months ago. Again, we're going to go through that effort. We're not going to see that result for a little while. So it's very hard to say, well, all we did was, polish up some blog posts. It's like, yeah, but the result of that effort won't be seen for a while. So you can lose the frame of what you actually did because you didn't see the result. You only saw the action. Yeah.
That's why it's so hard. I also like time box my calendar because I'm like, okay, I worked on this. Like this is what I did. Like
Yeah.
I also have the same problem. I think it's just a universal thing of like being uh too hard on yourself combination with like not seeing results immediately
And it probably is a
too.
universal thing, but
Yeah.
people don't want to talk about it because you're kind of saying like, I don't think I did much, or like you don't want to be seen. You don't want to say
Yeah.
that like I didn't do much this week,
Yeah.
and invite someone else because. And I think the key thing here is I've struggled with this. You don't want to invite someone in to review your work or review your schedule for the fear that they will agree with you, right? It's like they might come in and say, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
you're not doing much work at all." You're like, "Oh shit, I knew it. I knew I wasn't doing enough work." And now it's just like you start snowballing, right? Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people fear.
I think it's also just being very super aware or like self-aware enough to be like, okay, I'm like tripping out. Like I have done stuff, but it's just like because I'm so hard on myself and I am like used to being a high performer and like seeing things like automatically give me results, I'm minimizing my own efforts. And sometimes it's like weird because like you minimize your own efforts to kind of make yourself do more, if that makes sense. Like,
Right.
all right, the next question is a more investor focused question. So, this person on the startup subreddit is asking, what goes into an ideal pitch deck? Following up on my previous post for opening a US staffing firm. So, this might not be completely relevant in terms of the industry, but I thought it would be good to just go through what makes up a good pitch deck, what you would suggest people include in them, and maybe what to avoid.
Yeah, I think yeah. So if we dismiss the actual firm and the industry, the US staffing firm, and just talk about like how do we actually go into a pitch deck,
Hmm.
I think there's something to be said about customizing the pitch deck to who you're pitching to in regards to investment. So a lot of people will go in with a standard pitch deck and sit in front of multiple investors. But if you were to actually do some research into the history of the investors, then you might see what types of business, what types of investment, and what has been their risk threshold in the past when it comes to your type of investment you're asking for. So I think that's important. It's easy to go in with a generic one, but I think there's more value in actually not complete. There's not complete customization, but there are aspects of your pitch that you should be calling out for particular investors. One comment that I read in the thread that was, I think, really interesting and good is risks and mitigation. So this individual's talked about introduction, problem, solution, market opportunities, business model, go-to-market strategy, what their competitive advantage is, and the financials and how they're going to use the funds. That's pretty standard, right? And then the team, who are the experts bringing this to life. Stock standard, ask an AI engine. That's what they'll spit out for you. Most free templates out there will probably have those decks. But I think when it comes to showing a mature business brain, SWOT analysis is old school, like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. But there's also something to be said about doing that yourself and then presenting a deck on here are the weaknesses in our current operating environment. And here is my
Hmm.
plan on how to remediate that. Here is the threat to our core business, but here is my attempted mitigation for that. Because what you're also saying there is the way risk management goes is that if you identify a risk and you can own it yourself, then you're going to mitigate that personally. If there's a risk in the
Hmm.
market that you can't mitigate, then you essentially transfer that risk to the next highest stakeholder, which in this case might be the investors, right? So the risk here
Hmm.
is that we are going to push into this new market, explore this new geography, and we're not going to make it, right? I will do my best to mitigate that through the following actions. However, that risk still remains, right? The outcome of that risk is still the same. I'll try and decrease the likelihood of it occurring, but the outcome's still there. So having that maturity of thought to show them that you know that you're dealing with their money, that you're trying to be a good custodian for their investment, I think it goes a long way to having an ideal deck. So that's that risk part of it as well.
Hmm.
The other thing I would consider is being finding a good balance between being realistic and optimistic. So using a tool like Forecast Plus to forecast scenarios of here's my budgeted spend if all else being equal, and here's my best case scenario if I increase money in the right places. If, however, we go through a period of stagnation, here is what a worst case scenario looks like. But again, that's where you go. Here's the worst case scenario. Here's the risks. Here's my planned mitigation. So just that robust thought throughout that scenario. The final one I would say, and I've never really reconciled this coming from with business education that you do a lot of work on market research and analysis, and you go from this idea of total addressable market, serviceable addressable market, and people talk about TAM and SAM and ICP. And it always occurs to me when they say, like, the health food industry will be a $4 billion business by 2030. And it's like, so what? Right? Like, we're going to capture, they're like showing the potential of the global market, when in reality, you're a dinky firm at the back of New York that's going to try and target people on the East Coast. Like, yes, it's okay to put in there, but it comes off with a bit of fluff when you start with this giant, the healthcare industry is 4.5 billion. We work on this one particular sector. I'd much rather hear your plan around how you're going to identify and enter your niche without the rest of the fluff. Yes, I know the healthcare market's huge. Great. Just because you put 4 billion up there it's almost like smoke and mirrors. It's like saying you're going to be part of that 4 billion when in actual fact, all you really wanting to do is capture like 1 million of revenue out of that. I'd suggest just cutting down on the fluff of total market analysis and being really targeted in your particular subsector of the market that you want to go after, your serviceable addressable market, and how you're going to actually get in front of the right people that are going to grow your business from the very, very start. But yeah, apart from that, ideal pitch deck, customize it to the investors, know what's important to them, what they're looking for. Be realistic with your scenarios, which includes a risk mitigation sort of slide where you talk about risks to the industry, risks to your platform, and how you're going to attempt to mitigate them. And then finally, yeah, don't fill it with too much fluff around total market opportunities. Really focus on what you're going to deliver in your sphere of influence.
And I think you bring up a good point in terms of like the risk mitigation slides, because you want to beat them to that conversation, essentially. Like, they're going to have questions around it. That, like,
exactly. Yeah.
They're going to be asking you these questions anyway. So, like, start the conversation first. Okay, so this one is on retention. And we've talked about retention a bit. It's on the B2B SaaS subreddit. So the question is, what's one change you made that actually moved the needle on retention? So not looking for fluff, just genuinely curious, what small or big change helped keep users around longer? Was it better onboarding, charging price, product tweaks, emails, community? We've tried a bunch of things, tooltips, nudges, tutorial videos, etc., but only a couple really stuck. Would love to hear what worked or didn't for other, especially post-sign-up strategies.
Yeah. I think so. There is context required when it comes to industry and platform, as per any normal caveat. But what I will say is, like, those points that they raise there: better onboarding, pricing, product tweaks, emails, and community. They could all be contributors to increasing retention. When it comes to onboarding, that really will depend on the value metric that you're driving for that initial adoption. So how quickly is that time to value? So how quickly are you getting them to that time to value? And one thing I think of when it comes to Bear is around, are we getting them dashboards for their insights as quick as possible? Are we bringing that forward as far as we can? Pricing, people do the conversion from monthly to annual after about a 3-month mark. And again, that's got to predicated on good onboarding and user adoption. But that has been one effective way of having a, quite a large discount on annual plans presented at about that 3-month mark in order to increase retention over time. Product tweaks, that's really just being receptive to feedback and being able to rapidly adopt feedback and put it into the product. I think some of the commenters raised a really good point around personalization and segmentation. So as soon as you see someone come onto your platform, instead of giving them a generic onboarding toolkit, and we've done this with our onboarding when it comes to the actual integration they connect with, right? It's one thing to say, come connect to Baremetrics, get some great dashboards into your subscription analytics. It's another thing to say, thank you for connecting your Stripe account, your ChargeBeat account, your Google, your Apple, right? Other Google users like you have found value in these segments, right? And you give them specific segments that are valid to Google users based on the integration they've made with you. So you're not now saying Baremetrics is great for segmentation. You're saying Baremetrics is great for Google integration for users like you that find these segments useful. And that, to me, really brings, again, that time to value or that onboarding experience personalized and closer to where you want to be. So yeah, I'd suggest that personalization and segmentation based on use cases is a really great way to do it. And then I think tying into that is putting people in touch or giving them the ability to talk to other users like them. So if that's through community, if it's through use cases that you can deliver to them, people need to know that the tool they're using is relevant for the industry that they're in and the problem they're solving. And if you can give them social proofing, that goes a long way into doing that.
Is there anything in particular that you can think of that like would be like that you've seen? It doesn't have to be at Baremetrics as an example of something that increased retention.
Data companies is doing is fixed pricing versus variable. So they switch their entire pricing model from a variable usage consumption based model to a flat fee, and they have found an increase in retention just based on that. So I think it kind of speaks to the initial value proposition more than anything else. The client that's coming to them is looking for fixed fees, and they know that the predictable bill per month is going to be easier to stomach than a variable one. Moving to fixed fee model after maybe a period of variable is probably something that I've seen that will work as well. People want to remove that ambiguity. If they know the tool's right for them, but they hate the idea that they don't know what they're going to pay for it month on month, then moving to a fixed fee model is probably an effective way.
Okay. Let's see. So this next one is on the founder-led sales subreddit, and it's asking, what's the most awkward sales moment you've had, and what did you learn? I once interrupted a buyer mid-sentence to answer a question they hadn't actually asked yet. They paused, stared, and said, "That's not what I meant at all." Ouch. Now I always pause, ask, understand, then answer. What's a sales moment that made you cringe, but then made you better after? Do you have something around this?
So their first example there is, I've got 2 points on that. One, yes, you shouldn't interrupt a buyer mid-sentence, let them talk, right? But secondly, it's actually not a bad tactic to repeat back to them what they said in order to either confirm or give them room to explain more. Like you say, like, so what I hear you say, Andrea, is this, right? And you'll go, yeah, that's about right. Or you say, oh, not quite. What I actually meant to say was, like, even if you just say it in real plain terms or even deliberately make a mistake in what you said, then it gives them room to talk more. So I don't mind that tactic, but I don't want to interrupt a buyer mid-sentence, right? Because they could be about to give me the gem that's going to close the deal. Pause, ask, understand, then answer. Absolutely. I think I can't really pinpoint one sales moment that made me cringe. I think it's what I've seen when doing call reviews and other sales teams as well is where you haven't understood the background of the account. And so you might jump straight into a demo and they'll be like, hang on, guys, we're an existing customer. You're like, oh, I thought you were a prospect, right? Or things like, we used this platform last year. What we really wanted to get to the bottom of was A, B, and C. Where the rep or the salesperson hasn't done the research to understand the case, that's probably awkward or embarrassing, I think, because it kind of just shows you're just in a sales machine, like next lead, next lead. And that gets a little bit impersonal. And I think really breaks down the conversation. So yeah, I think that's one that I always sort of cringe a little bit at when I'm like, oh, you didn't know the background before you got in this conversation. It shows poor planning. The only other awkward ones I've had, this wasn't awkward. This was just astounding. We were working with a South Korean reseller agency, and we'd had a really good relationship with them over time. And my contact there was great. We were working on a big deal with, I think, Samsung or Hyundai or something like that. And they would have become our sort of reseller in South Korea. Anyway, we were having these conversations and we were about to pitch to, I think it was Samsung, and we were organizing the final details. Anyway, we had this call. I got up in the middle of the night because it was the time zones were different. And I'm sitting there and up comes my screen and my contact is sitting there with a drip in his arm. And I was like, mate, what's going on? And he's like, yeah, I just got out of surgery. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, I had a double bypass. And I'm like, why are you even on this call right now? I'm like, what are you doing? Like, go back to bed. You're in hospital still. He's like, no, it's fine. I just wanted to get out a few emails and sort some stuff out. I'm like, dude, I'm hanging up right now. I do not want to talk to you while you have a drip in the arm less than 24 hours after you had a double bypass. Let's talk next week. Like, I just could not. And he was a great guy. That's the thing that threw me. He was like happy. He was laughing about it. I'm like, no, this is not normal. I'm like, you can't be doing this. I don't know what your local work culture is like, but I'm not going to support this. So that wasn't so much like awkward sales as it was just a weird display of drive and focus and commitment to the job. That was the kicker. Like, I saw the drip in his arm. I was like, I can't remember. I don't want to say his name, but I was like, "Hey, is that a drip in your arm? You all right?" He's like, yeah. I just got out of hospital. I'm like, no.
Let's not normalize this.
Right. Yeah. And I'm like, is he gonna like get overwhelmed on the call and like lose energy and cark it on me. I'm like, I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to be anywhere near that. So let's just cut away from here. Yeah. So that wasn't awkward in a sales perspective. That was just an awkward salesman. I've had people rock up to calls with, shirtless, just like sitting back on a lounge or something, like just talking to me. Yeah. Like on their phone instead of on computer. And that makes it really hard to pitch and sell. Yeah. Things like that are awkward, but nothing really in the conversation aside from that one I mentioned before. It's like where you don't understand the client, or you use the wrong name, or you use the wrong client name, or reference something that they're not even involved in. That can be a little bit awkward. Yeah.
It's always so ironic because you meant it in the opposite way, especially when you're like, "Oh yeah, I remember so and so," and they're like, "No, that's not me."
That's not me.
Awkward.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you guys are the one that have this, that, and the other. And they're like, no, 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 that's not
No.
us. Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah. Have you started a trial yet? We're an existing customer. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's very cringe. All right. Well, let's move on to the next question.
It's a theme
That is,
today. Going full solo in a few months, trying to figure out how to keep that kind of checkpoints in when I'm solo. Do you have a system or ritual? Do you check in with someone regularly, or have you found another way to stay focused on track? So this is the same thing, right? If you do have a daily ritual, that's great. For me, generally the first half hour is just emails and Slack threads, because that's low cognitive load for me and I'm still early in my morning. So I want to get that brain fog out of the way before my first call. So that's always my ritual first. And it's also my ritual of an afternoon when I shut down as well. Clear back any emails that I haven't addressed today, clear my Slack channels for the afternoon, and then switch off. Similarly, when I'm running with multiple companies, I'll always time box different company time throughout the week to make sure I address issues there. So like I'm working alongside ring capture at the moment. So I've got a couple of hour blocks. Whether I use them or not for ring capture isn't the point. It's the fact that if I have to, that's when I'll do it, right? I won't let it come into my normal time. I'll do it in that dedicated time so that I can address it when I have dedicated time to it. And the rest is checking in with someone regularly. That's a great way to do it. Find someone else in your space that's doing the same thing, a mentor, anyone who can help you stay on track if you need to. One thing I found that I ebb and flow between is checklists. And so I used to have a whiteboard up here on the wall, giving it to my daughter because I wasn't using it and she wanted to draw on it. I started the year with a day-to-day and a week-to-week and a month-to-month matrix as well of tasks that I wanted completed daily, weekly, and monthly. It lasted about 2 weeks, and I'd lost it, right? And I'm not going to fight it. I'm like, okay, that's more mental anguish than it takes to manage the checklist that it is actually getting stuff done. So that my goal matrix is really where I focus now. And then I did the same thing in Notion. I wanted to do this is last year now. I wanted to do a daily diary in Notion of what I want to get done today. And at the end of the day, I would say what I did get done, right? And then I'd push tasks to tomorrow. And what I found was I'd be trying to find tasks to list down, as opposed to projects that take more than a day, right? Sometimes, like I mentioned before,
right. Yep.
you'll do something now and then you've got to wait for something to happen so you can progress it. So I was trying to do these daily tasks and they'd repeat. And I was realizing that I was doing this list for the list's sake. I was spending like 30 minutes doing it. I'm like, that's just wasted time. So for me now, time boxing works. I know you're a fan of time boxing as well. Being time where you can go and address something, doing goals and having that as your primary driver, I think is important. And then the check-in, we're pretty blessed to have a good internal network and a wider network that we can check in with other people. And I have one-on-ones with most other CEOs throughout the week across the fund. So we can always check in and be like, yeah, just SEO is really shitty this week. We saw a massive decrease in clicks. Our trials have been bad. What are you guys doing with it, right? And they might give me some ideas on things I can do the next week for it. So checking in like that sort of is a good way to be accountable as well. But yeah, I think put some systems in place you want. Don't get hung up on it. Just keep checking in on your progress.
It's funny that you mention the checklist being a distraction, because for me, it's definitely getting to that point. We'll see if it lasts, but yeah. So the last question is on the startups subreddit, and it is, how do you get better at pitching? They have applied to a couple of accelerators and they have not been accepted, so they don't have that avenue to leverage for feedback, but how do they get better?
Yeah.
Essentially.
So this is less about pitching and more about communicating effectively, right? And they're two different skills. One, pitching is just about being a good communicator. So I suggest the first thing you need to do is work on how you're communicating or how you confidently speak in front of people. That's the first part of it. Because when you get to that
Yeah.
point, then you can wrap a pitch framework around that and shape it. You want people like stories, and being able to be a good storyteller is how you be good at pitching, right? When I was at, to name drop here, when I was at Harvard Business School, we did a whole 2-day program on storytelling as
Oh,
managers,
really?
as CEOs, as executives, on how to sell a story, whether you're selling yourself, whether you're selling a company. Like when I say sell, I don't mean it in the literal sense. I mean it in like bringing someone along for the ride. And you always look to examples like Simon Sinek talks about, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so the idea is you're not selling computers, you're selling beautiful design systems. You
Mhm.
know, you're not selling Nike runners, you're selling a lifestyle, right? It's like you want to
Mhm.
get better. So I think the ability to cut through that as well and figure out how to communicate a more emotionally driven, a more story driven narrative than a very clinical sort of pitch is one thing. When I used to work with officer candidates in the military, they'd have to go through a board process where they'd stand in front of a panel of selectors, and they'd have to present themselves, and the panel would ask them questions about their academic achievements, their sporting achievements, their leadership experience, and they'd have to answer
Mhm.
confidently and sell themselves to the board, right? And a lot of the
Mhm.
prep work we did for that was getting them comfortable just speaking in general. And I used to go through this exercise with them where I'd have a group of 5 or so, and we'd spend about 2 hours doing some training, and I'd go to them and say, hey, I want you to go stand up in front of the room, and I want you to talk about the breeding cycle of the Google duck for 2 minutes, right? One, the Google duck doesn't
Yeah.
exist, right?
Yeah.
So they had to get up there and on the fly just start to figure it out. And what you find is when you give someone an exercise like that, they slow down, they start to think more because they've got to think before they speak. They don't get overwhelmed at
Yeah.
trying to remember what they had to memorize. They start going,
Mhm.
well, today I'm here to talk to you about the Google duck. An interesting fact about the Google duck is that it is entirely situated in North America. And they just start, and the thing is, they're sort of creating the story as they go, as they speak it, right? And that just sort of
Mhm.
feeds into this idea. The other one was, why is camel milk the next agricultural revolution in Australia? That were my 2 big questions I get people to talk about. So
Yeah.
nonsensical, right? But it forces them to think in that sort of story mode because they've got to make the story up. And I found one got people out of their own head a lot because they wouldn't get flustered about trying to memorize a script or memorize a speech. They would have to just do it on the fly. And we do that more and more, and they'd shake it off and get more regular with it. And the work we did at Harvard was around, we had to sort of draw on a childhood memory, and we had to use as much emotionally driven language as we could to describe a childhood memory and speak of it in, like, you had to invoke the senses, right? So
Mm.
as I sit at the dinner table and I can hear the crackle of the oil in the background and smell, the fry, whatever, I was like, you start to invoke the smell, the sound, and then as it come to the table and I picked it up and it melted in my hands, like you start to invoke these things. So being able to be a better communicator and invoke emotion is the first step, I think, at getting better at pitching, because when you get to the pitch, then you can say, I was sitting in my office. The whir of the fan was in the background. It was a hot summer day, and I felt the sweat start to bead on my forehead. As I was slaving over a spreadsheet for the 3rd time that day, I just couldn't get the data to do what I wanted. I felt my blood pressure start to rise. My anxiety was creeping in, and I was getting continually overwhelmed with the need to input this data so regularly and not get the response I wanted. That's when I decided I would build Excel for Dummies, right? Like that, you get that story behind it before you go and here's the solution. So being able to be a good storyteller, I think is part of that pitch as well.
Mm. Mm. That's a good point. This makes me think of all the Shark Tank pitches I've seen. Because they oftentimes start like that.
Yeah, and they would have been given coaching on that before they got on the show. They would have been given coaching on how emotional pitching. Yeah, some of them go way over the top, right? It's like, this is the
Yeah.
first of its kind, and it's like, I've seen that in the gas station before. I don't think that's first of its kind. Why are you different? It's like, because we have a different design. Do you? Is it distinguishable? Differentiated? I don't know.
Yeah, they can dream. They're on Shark Tank.
Exactly. That's what they're there for. Good for a bit of TV. Yeah, yeah. Well, I think, was it the Scrub Daddy was one that they passed on that was uber successful. I'm pretty sure they passed on Scrub Daddy, and it became one of the success stories. Because if you look it up, like most Shark Tank funded companies tank, ones that they passed on that then. Oh, that's right. Ring Doorbell. Ring Doorbell was pitched on Shark Tank. The day the video doorbell was pitched, and they all like, nah, that doesn't have a future. and then they went away and then sold to Google. Yeah, yeah, it's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Well, thank you for a great session, Luke.
I'll catch you.
Sounds good.
All right, see you, Andrea.
Bye, Luke.
Bye.